Kat Sebastian writes queer historical romance. Her books have received starred reviews from Kirkus, Publishers Weekly, Library Journal, and Booklist, and she's been featured in the Washington Post, Entertainment Weekly, and Jezebel. She was born in New Jersey and lived in New York and Arizona before settling down in the swampy part of the South. So when she isn't writing, she's probably reading, having one-sided conversations with her dog, all of us, or doing crossword puzzles. Kat will be joined in conversation with Lori Sterling. So, Lori is a licensed mental health counselor who focuses on helping LGBTQ plus individuals both at her private practice, tea time therapy, and with her career as a medical care coordinator at Jasmine, a nationally recognized LGBTQ plus youth center located here in Jacksonville, Florida. When she's not advocating for or working with the community, you can most likely find her painting, playing Animal Crossing, or on the mat with her Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class. So not as relatable, but still amazing. And before we officially get started, I did want to say thank you to our friends of Willow Branch Library for sponsoring this Lit Chat, and this is National Friends Appreciation Week, and we're very grateful for them and for all the work that they do in sponsoring programs like this and for helping our community. So thank you to our interviewers and to the friends.
Not sure how to follow up such a lovely just introduction. I feel like I should be introduced that way every place I go. Just open up the door and just be like, boom, ready, on call. But we are having a nice little lit chat, so I am very curious. So I fully peeked at your website and your Instagram and your Twitter before this. And it said that you used to be a lawyer and a teacher and now a writer. And I'm just wondering, what led you to writing?
So I was a lawyer 20 years ago, okay? A little more than 20 years ago, actually. So if you want to do the math, that's sad. It's sad math. I hated it, okay? I had gone to law school because I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so I had good grades and I had good LSAT scores. And so I went to law school. And that seemed like a acceptable choice. And then I did adequately in law school. And it turned out that I did not do adequately as a lawyer, at all. I hated every minute of it. And so after a year, I ran screaming away from that. The reasonable choice would have been to go into it. I was doing corporate law. The reasonable choice would have been to do different law, right? Obviously, if this were one of my children, I'd be maybe you want to think about something you'd like. I don't know.
Environmental laws.
Just a nonprofit. They exist. But instead I was no, I'm going to be a teacher. Okay. And I had taught a little bit. And so this should not be a story that ends well, right? This should be a story where it's oh good, it's another job I hate, but I actually love teaching. And I was happy to wake up in the morning, which had not been the case before. And I did that until my oldest kid was born, and then at the same time we moved across the country. And so I did the thing where you have kids and also lose all your certifications at the same time, Mm-hmm. And so then I had 2 more kids, and at this point I'm not working. There's no work, right? Because there's no job that I'm qualified for that's paying for 3 daycares. And so I just sort of stayed at home and chased my children around for a while and had severe postpartum depression and read romance novels at the rate of 1 every 36 hours. Okay. I had a baby in one arm and a Bridgerton book in the other, for 3 years. And so then when finally I came up from air, I was you know what? There's one thing in the world I'm qualified to do, and it is to write a Regency romance novel. That's it. Okay?
You surrounded yourself in it. You bathed yourself in it.
I have an MFA in Regency romance. And again, this is not a story that should end well, okay? But I wrote a book, and the first, my first book, The Soldier Scoundrel, is the first book I ever completed beyond 3 paragraphs, okay? It's the first book I attempted to write, and it sold, pretty much right away. And I feel like that's, I got super lucky because of the way the market was at that point, and right now I wouldn't have the same experience, but I kind of stumbled into something that I love doing, and I love it more than anything I've done, and it is genuinely a joy. So that is the longest possible answer to why writing.
You know what? If the answer is I discovered something that I loved and I found out that I kick ass on it, then woo. That's a great way to end a story.
I really cannot emphasize enough how little writing I had done before my first book. I had written bad legal briefs, okay? I had written IEP reports. I had written emails. And I had written many, many years before Sherlock Holmes fan fiction, okay? As a teenager, okay? So, but, there is something to be said for totally immersing, something happens when you really immerse yourself in something. You do internalize something of what a book looks like, right? What a story is supposed to do and how it's supposed to make you feel. And sometimes you get lucky and you can replicate it.
Well, how do you write your books? What's your process?
So it starts with a vague idea, right? I am I could write about, with my most recent book, I was I want to write about, friends to lovers, roommates type situation, okay, in the late 50s. But I couldn't really, I couldn't figure out what, there has to be more than that. There has to be a hook. There has to be, some other detail that's going to convince somebody to pay me to write it and somebody to buy it. And then I was oh, newspapers, right? Because, newspapers are, unfortunately, very historical fiction-y, right? We have, when we look at the past and we think of things that are things that are better in the past, right? And the newspapers, okay? I know that the list isn't long, but newspapers is on it, right? I've always been fascinated by the idea of people are constantly in a newsroom, clacking away at their teletype machines or whatever. And so wanting to research something is the next part, right? If I know that I can spend a few months of my life reading books about something, that's a good sign. And then from there, I can sort of triangulate into who the characters have to be. One of them has to be, I knew that I wanted to write one who was the boss's son, and one who was your classic scrappy reporter who we've all seen in many different movies and other media. So that's basically the start of my process, is to figure out who I'm writing about and what the background is, what the environment is, or the setting. And then I just start writing. I don't really usually outline. Sometimes if my publisher wants an outline, I'll produce it, but it is very much a work of fiction. It is not the book,
It's a concept.
It's a concept, okay? It is a book that could exist, okay? And it is a book that is probably only a few degrees away from the book that I'm gonna write, but they want it. They need to have that because they have to give it to the sales team in order for somebody to write me a check, right? And so that's my really sophisticated understanding of publishing. Is they give the outline to the sales team.
I was going to ask about your experience with publishing, and it seems just I don't know, I hand them something, they hand me money.
I actually really do know more than that, okay? But this part of it, why, what about an idea is appealing is completely a mystery to me. I don't know. But I kind of just start writing, and then when I realize I've gone in a wrong direction, I back up, and then I go in a different direction, and sometimes I'm way off track, and then I have to go back and scrap a lot. But even with all of that, I really do draft pretty quickly. Every year for a couple of years, I've done NaNoWriMo, and I can, at the end of that, this is my job. I'm not dividing my writing with a day job, At the end of November, I do usually have the bulk of a novel. Is it a good novel? No, it is not a good novel. But it is a book that looks like a book, and it takes probably another 2 months to finish it and then revise it, and then I can give it to my editor. And then it takes another god-awful amount of time to revise it again after that. But yeah, that is my process.
You mentioned NaNoWriMo, and I had like momentary like war flashbacks. I have never completed it. I get to like November 17th, and I'm just like, what's writing? What's the concept of writing?
Right.
What's English? Maybe I shouldn't write in this language anymore.
It is like a very different feeling when it is your job, right? Because like I was gonna write anyway, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, there was not gonna be, November wasn't gonna come to an end without me writing something. And this way I can be like, at the end of every day, I can be like, I'm winning. You know?
Someone has to win NaNoWriMo. It's not me, so someone really should.
And it's, like the word threshold to win NaNoWriMo, the daily word threshold, is less than I was gonna write anyway. Like, there's no suspense here as to whether I was gonna like be a winner, but I feel like I truly have accomplished something. And I also use the the name of it is totally escaping me, but it's this like word tracker website where you can see the words you do go up on a graph. Okay. And if you are the kind of person who doesn't really understand graphs but does understand the line going up, it's like really, really satisfying.
A visual reward system,
Yes.
real fast.
Yes.
So if that's your process for like getting the basics of the book down, like do you also do like a lot of research for it? Because I know that you primarily do like historical queer fiction. If no one knew that coming in, then
I do, at the beginning, like before I write the book at all, I do a lot of research that's like, to give me like, I do research that's like for vibes, okay? Like my next book that's coming out next year, which has neither a title nor a cover, but does exist, is one of the characters is a baseball player on a team that is not the 1962 Mets, because nobody wants to get sued, okay?
very specifically not
right.
that.
But it's actually 1960, so it couldn't even be, okay? But I love baseball conceptually, okay? Like I don't like watching the game. I like it as it exists in my mind, watching it 30 to 40 years ago with my dad, okay? Mm-hmm. Like, that's it. And I wanted a book that would sort of like, and also like baseball's a very nostalgia thing, right? Okay, so it fits in with A, my feelings about it, and B, writing a historical book about it. And so I spent a couple of months just reading like baseball memoirs, baseball biographies, like all of the like Roger Angell and Jimmy Breslin writings, you know, about baseball, just for vibes, just for like a sense of tone. And also when I started writing, I wouldn't like really screw up right off the bat, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so I do that kind of like base layer research to begin with. Then as I'm writing, there are things like, wait a minute, like what subway train would they take to get from point A to point B? Okay, it depends on my mood. Like maybe I will look it up right away, okay? If I'm in a procrastinate research type of frame of mind, I could do a whole lot of research about that. Okay, like I have a whole Notion board that I assembled during one fit of like, I can't possibly write a book without having the most meticulously organized research about public transit, you know? And if any of you are ever writing a book about public transit in New York in the 50s to 60s, you should probably email me, okay?
It's like you have the resources.
Just send you a link to the Notion board. It'll be incredible. But like, or I just stick TK in the manuscript, which just means to come, and like it's very easy to like then do a Control F for TK and then go through and find all the spots that you didn't fill in later on. But yeah, like that. So that's the two basic layers of research that I do. Like beforehand is big, and then during the process is more like detail stuff. Like what would a hamburger cost at Shea Stadium, and you know, like that type of thing.
Okay. So vibes and then like daily life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But daily life could be procrastinated until later on if need be.
Yes. and should be. A lot of people are like, you really should leave that, right? So like when you stop and you research like what does a hamburger cost, you feel like you're breaking a rule, but actually you're just working.
Am I allowed to ask questions about the new book, or is it like still not ready?
Oh, it's ask whatever you want.
Yay, total freedom. Okay, so it does not have a title or anything. We have vibes, and the vibes seem to be definitely not that one baseball team whose name I already have forgotten. Yeah, it's great that I forgot it. There's right. This live recording, we'll also forget it. But is it going to be another fun queer romance, or?
It's going to be like in the same universe and general like energy as We Could Be So Good. Like it's 1960. It takes place. There's like a couple of overlapping characters of We Could Be So Good. One of the characters is a journalist. The other's an athlete. And like the journalist guy gets assigned to cover the sports team. And yeah, that's the setup.
Okay. Is it going to be overlap kind of similar to Kit Webb and the Marvelous Crimes?
Good question. No, thank God. It's going to take place like a solid year after. Like I can never do that again. Like I wore myself out trying to make, like for Kit Webb and Marion Hayes, the timelines overlap, okay? And there are so many authors who effortlessly do this, okay? Like I don't understand it. Like it's, I had a whole murder board with the red tape board, like trying to make things line up. And there aren't even that many plot points between the two books. Okay. Like it was like writing with ADHD, you know what I mean? Like usually like it doesn't really hit me because I'm just writing, but when it comes time to like organize facts in a linear way that's going to make sense to someone who doesn't actually live in my head, yeah, that's where I fell short. So no, thank God, this is this totally separate timeline. Okay.
Full disclosure, I read the Marvelous Crimes, and then like a week later, I read Kit, and it took me like until chapter 4 to be like, oh my God, this is all happening at the same time.
Like I know them.
For some reason, I just blanked out on Kit's name when I got the second book, so I was just like, oh, new book. And then I was just like, oh, this is everything else that was happening. When Kit was just not involved.
That's like the energy that I want people to go into those books with, just like head empty.
I am the target audience, and I'm so happy. Okay, but speaking about this book, I have not gotten the chance to read this book yet, and I'm so sorry for everyone who wanted to check this book out from this library. I currently have it. I have a week left, so... But there's a nice bookseller that you could buy it today, or you can wait for a week for me to get myself together. But what did you enjoy about writing this book?
So I really like starting from a point of people liking one another, like my two main characters liking one another. Okay, and I realized that the sort of like rivalry or enemy situation is the most popular in genre romance. Okay. But I like one from basically page 1. These are two people who are invested in one another's happiness. Okay, I find that really comforting to write. I like it's like that's nice. Like that's the idea of there being like a person throughout the narrative, like even when you're going through stuff, who has your back. I really like that. So writing this book was a total labor of love. Like it came together super fast, and the version of the book, like as it exists, is really similar to the book that I pitched. Like that the outline wasn't fictitious, and like the book at the end of NaNoWriMo like was pretty much that book, and that does not always happen. I also wanted to write a book that was super. Like, so when you think of the 50s, you think of that, like, that version of domesticity that I think that we now recognize as A, pretty fake, and B, limited to people who are like white, Christian, able-bodied, straight, cis, right? Like there's the number of people who were cut out from that version of like idealized, patriotic 1950s home life stuff is bigger than the people who were included by it, right? But I wanted to write about somebody who really wants that, okay? Like a queer man who really wants that. Like that's like he grew up in an unstable way, and he's like, I am gonna get my life settled. You know, I'm gonna have a job. I'm gonna do a job. I am going to marry somebody and settle down. Like I am going to like have this thing, and then my life will be set, and I won't have to think about it anymore. You know, and then he falls in love with a man and is still like, no, like we're having like this, we're still having this, okay? Like we're having a home together, we're making dinner, you know, and because that there is an appeal to having your life settled, and to wake up in the morning and there's somebody making you coffee, you know, like that's the stuff that the whole 1950s home life thing was sold on, right? And that's because it is appealing to a lot of people. So I do not remember what the question was, but that is some kind of answer.
No, I loved your answer, because one of the things that you brought up about like how like with this book, with the setting that I was in, and the kind of like the idealized version of that time period doesn't really fit in with people who were queer, who were minorities in any sense of the phrase. And then you have your other books that were predominantly featured like the Regency era. And I want to know, what is it like to try to kind of give voice back to people who kind of got overlooked during those time frames? Because at the end of the day, queer people existed in the Regency. Queer people existed in the 50s and 60s.
So like when I like, so remember like me with a romance novel in one hand and a baby in the other. Mm-hmm. Okay. So like I've never not been out as bi. Okay. Like that's like from like teenagehood. Okay. Like I grew up very lucky with family who were like, okay, you know, like, and like, it's just never been an issue. I was probably like 300 books into my like immersive MFA in Regency romance before I was like, wait, you know what I mean? Like where are we? Like where are we in these books? In the older ones as villains, okay. In the newer ones as maybe sassy friends, you know? And then in the very newer ones, like, yeah, as side characters. But like it was the fact that it took me so long to ping to the fact that like I'm just not there, like I'm just literally not in the narrative that I'm taking so much comfort from, like that pissed me off, like at myself mainly, okay, but also like at the absence. And that's kind of what spurred me to sit down and write the book, where I was like, you know, like it doesn't exist, so like clearly I was sent, you know, to fix it.
Like, I'm just gonna do it myself.
Right. Like that's the only way it could possibly resolve it. Okay. So it did not take me long to realize these books were out there, okay? Not only were they out there recently, but they've been out there for a long, long time. There was like a whole tradition of like gay gothic romance that existed in the early 80s, and that was actually published by my publisher, and I did not even know that. It's super hard to get your hands on a copy of any of them, but they're out there. And they existed at the time, like mainly independently published. But there is a findability issue, right? Like if somebody who knows how to Google can't find it, right? And I was highly motivated to find it, like that, and you would have to know like the right social media accounts to follow. Like that is not an ideal way to find a book. So I've read them all now, though.
It reminds me of back in the day where you had to like follow certain people's live journals to figure out like where it was. I'm going all the way back to LiveJournal to find out the information of like who was doing like this secret like gay fan fiction of Anne Rice novels and like not fearing the consequences.
Oh, and now we've come full circle to gay fan fiction on Anne Rice novels. Like it's so beautiful. Like I feel like when that started again, like this round, I was like, oh my God, like I truly have lived to see like the death and birth of a planet, you know?
Sorry, I'm still just laughing.
I really was like, I was like the youth today. Like, get to have this.
The youth are reclaiming and they're not fearing lawsuits. And you know what? Good for them.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. But I had a question because I remember at the very beginning you mentioned fan fiction and the teenage part of you that was writing. I think you said it was Sherlock Holmes fan fiction. Okay. This is the benefit of being a therapist. You can track something for like 30 minutes and come back to it. What were the other fan fiction and early just like fandom that you were into?
Buffy the Vampire Slayer was like really, really formative for me. And like part of that is like, you know, like queer representation like on the screen. And like I cannot emphasize enough how in like 2000, 2001, this was like I needed it repeated to me. Like that it was actually happening like in real life. Yeah, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And then like, you know, I went on fanfic hiatus for a while and because Sherlock Holmes came back, but it was very much like Sherlock inflected fan fiction and I didn't want that. Okay. I wanted like 1890s Baker Street Irregulars, like the whole mood. And then in 2018, I started reading Captain America fanfic, and I imprinted hard, like on that. Like I, like just dropped everything, you know, and spent a couple of months like nobody can talk to me. I'm very busy with a project.
It's very important.
I'm not going to tell you what the project is.
That's probably for your safety. It's probably for the best.
And since then there's always some fandom. Since then there's always a fandom that I'm like neck deep in, you know, filled with regret. But
just deep in the trenches.
That's right.
But with that, what would be one of your favorite couples that you have written in your books, or like one of your favorite couples that you have read about or embraced or witnessed? These are two different questions. I realized I phrased it very well.
Okay. A couple that I wrote.
A couple that you wrote, and then a couple that you experienced. Let's go with that.
Okay. That I would want more fan fiction of.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
so
the baseline.
I want more Gideon the Ninth fan fiction. Okay, I keep putting this out into the world. Like, I want more. Legitimately do not care about who. Okay, like, I just want more in that universe. I don't want a coffee shop AU, okay? I don't want to read a high school AU. I want it in that universe because I am not able to move on with my life until the fourth book comes out, you know?
Which book again?
Gideon the Ninth, the Locked Tomb series by Tamsin Weir. I almost like tried to give you an elevator pitch, like necromancers in space, but there's nothing I can possibly say that would do it justice. Okay. Of my couples, this is hard because the books I write are. So you know what curtain fic is? Okay, like where it's writing fanfic of a couple, but really what they're doing is like the most mundane, like domestic stuff in the world. It's called curtain fic because it's like, what if they went to Target and bought curtains, you know? Okay, so my books are like 2/3 curtain fic, okay? And so I don't know how. Like it is almost, I know that fanfic of my books exists, so I know it's there, but it is difficult for me to imagine what they could possibly be doing. Like, unless it's the kind of AU where like now they're like fighting demons, you know, like I don't know. But yeah, honestly, like when I realized there was fanfic for some of my books, I was like starry-eyed, like, you know, and like non-responsive for a long time.
You've made it. You've made it.
Exactly.
I wrote fan fiction. Now they're making fan fiction of me. Everything has come full circle. Yes. The writer continuation circle is being fed this way.
Nobody could tell me anything for like weeks.
I'm sorry. I'm also just learning the phrase curtain fict, and I have been deeply involved in fan fiction for like the majority of my life, and I'm just like, ooh, new word. I mean, I'm thinking off the top of my head. I feel like there's a fan fiction out there that's probably just like the continuation of the Marvelous Crimes, where it's just them committing crimes, and
like leverage style. Okay,
yes.
like yeah. That was like yes, that's people should do that. Okay, but yeah,
it's like I'm putting recommendations out. I want to read it. Wait, what is our time? I don't want to make sure that I'm not just keep asking. Okay. I did have one other question, because when I was on your website, I looked through some of your books, and I kept noticing that your tagline was like, fall in love, eat the rich. Yeah. I'm so curious.
Okay. That started because I think it was just something that somebody said on Twitter, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to own that. But a lot of historical romance, especially when I started writing like 8 years ago, was very much like in service of the idea that inherited wealth is good, okay? And I mean, nothing wrong with that. Like, honestly, I love a Duke romance as much as anybody else does. Like, there's something to be said for the fantasy of like, I'm gonna fall in love with somebody, and like they're gonna have piles of money, and then my problems are gonna be solved. Like, I get it, okay? And I can be there for the length of time it takes to read a book, but for the length of time it takes to write a book, I simply cannot suspend disbelief like that, you know? And so I need to write books where if there's someone who is rich, they are going to get rid of that, okay? And where we accept the idea that inherited wealth is bad, and that there are like, systems of inequity historically that are just in the bad column, and like when I was writing in that period, there just weren't like it felt good to push back on what felt like the status quo at the time, Now there are so many more books that have that kind of like worldview. And also bear in mind, this is all in like 2016, okay? So like we're all like feeling things, and we're all like, okay?
As a group.
Like as a group, okay? And but like right now, like there are like the historical romance that there is like a lot of it is like very like refreshingly progressive. It's something I could not have foreseen 5 years ago.
I mean, it sounds like 10 years ago you were reading and just wondering, it was like, hey, I'm not even in here. And now it's just like,
yeah.
Oh, we're moving forward. Maybe the current writers that are today are younger and queerer and just like, what, I'm going to do me.
And it also like when I started writing, like there was the number of like sapphic historical romances were like there were so few that like when people would ask for some, I would have to resort to like Sarah Waters, just like anybody. Do you know what I mean? Like just like throwing names out there, And now there are so many that like I could read a new one every week, and not run out, which is an amazing place of abundance that I could not have imagined.
For the new writers coming out with like some of the new, younger, and more progressive novels, would you have any advice from someone who kind of went through the trenches?
So like my experience is so like rooted in having started 8 years ago, right? When like at that point, my publisher was doing my books like digital first, and they were willing to take a chance on something they had no idea whether it would sell or not. The stakes were not only low, the stakes just did not exist, okay? That is not the case at all with publishing now. So any advice that I would have would be good for like anyone who wanted to time travel, right? And get in there if you want to, you know what I mean? Like, but like right now it is like the people I know who are querying right now are just like they are suffering. Like it is so rough. And even established authors, like I have a friend who was genuinely having a hard time selling a third book. But it was the Wild West a couple of years ago, and now it is like much different. So The advice really is that like there is an audience for like no matter how weird a book you're writing, there really is an audience for it. Like there is someone whose day is going to be made by whatever it is that you're writing. Whether you find a publisher who agrees with that is a different story, but there are other ways to get stories to readers, right? So that is my advice.
I think we got someone coming to the mic.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for audience questions. So thank you for the great conversation, Kat and Lori, thus far. So we're going to collect your questions. I have a volunteer on that side, so if you'd like to pass it over, and I'll go ahead and collect from this side once I'm done here. So we'll go ahead and collect them, hand them to Lori, and we'll take us on home. So if you're in our Zoom audience, please do type in your questions to the Q&A chat we have there, and we will also get them up here. Thanks.
It looks like we invoked a lot of questions. Okay. What is the hardest part about writing queer historical fiction?
Like for me, the hardest part of writing anything is getting enough conflict in to sustain the story. Like I want to do like I want to include the minimal amount of conflict that can sustain a book, right? Like I feel like there should be an equation, right? Like there should be a way to figure it out. And instead, I usually wind up writing like including like all of this like extraneous garbage conflict that I then go and delete. I like cut away as much of it as I can until I'm left with like a structure that can support, 90,000 words of book,
Okay. Next one up is, who do you like to read when you're not writing?
Oh, I love this. Okay. Okay, Olivia Waite is an auto-buy author for me, okay? Like, I will read anything she writes in any genre she chooses to write it in, okay? What is the Celestial Mechanics book, her first Regency, has some of the loveliest writing I have ever seen in a historical romance or anything. And I'm eagerly awaiting news of whatever she's going to do next. Definitely an auto-buy. Let's see, who else? And I mean, like, I already talked about Gideon the Ninth. And I do like, honestly, I really do like all of the, like, contemporary, like, bestseller types, like Emily Henry, okay? Like, I genuinely do. I'm having the thing where like you've never read a book before when somebody asks you for a recommendation, and this is not ideal. Okay, let's go to the next question, then it'll occur to me, and then I'll just shout it out.
We can
out of
rotate
context,
back. We
like,
can swing back.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Next question up is, how much of the book takes shape in the first draft versus the rewrites?
The scaffolding is there in the first draft. You know what I mean? Like, at least the scaffolding is there. And then the nuance happen. Like, things like theme and characterization, like, they happen usually in the rewrites. Jackie Lau, okay, that's the out of context. I will read anything Jackie Lau writes also, like, every single time. And she writes contemporaries.
Okay. Next one up. What book of yours would you recommend that someone read first?
So if they like, if they have the kind of like temperament where they can read things out of order, okay, then I think The Rune of a Rake is like it's like a very fun introduction to the idea of queer Regency romance, okay. Otherwise, I do think this book has my best, like, for whatever, I mean, whatever, like, best is like, and who am I? Like, I have no objectivity. I do think this book is probably my best writing, like, for whatever value that means. So, yeah.
Just picturing you putting like a sticker on this one, just being like, this one is
my
good.
best.
It's good. Okay. Are you planning a third London?
Oh,
No.
No.
No,
No.
I didn't even get to finish it.
I thought you were going to say Cabot, because I get like 3 emails a week about if I'm going to read a third Cabot book. And, not Cabot, Page and Summers. And I get that so often that I have to send, I have like a canned like response that I cut and paste, which is like, I'm really sorry. Like I had planned on having one out this year, but instead I don't. Like no excuse. No, another in the Kitweb family. No, I am like not at this point, and not at any foreseeable point. Yeah.
I do think that like having to overlap those 2 books may have changed your brain chemistry, as you said.
The amount of work it would take to like.
What if it's just in the future, like a year
20,
away?
they're on a spaceship.
We've really jumped ahead. Somehow there's time traveling. It's a whole new thing.
Nobody can accuse me of continuity errors if they've all been cryogenically frozen. Now they're in space.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm having a lot of fun with the 20th century and like more modern settings right now. Like for me, so much of the writing the book process is me being interested in it, right? Either in the characters or in the setting or in some weird detail that's just working for me, you know? And so right now, that's what's working for me. Like I got, like with the Kitweb and Marion Hayes books, like what got me through those books was I really like the clothing from that era, okay? Like I just really, I love it, you know? And it turns out you can write 2 books, or I can write 2 books when your motivation is, I want to describe the clothes, okay?
Okay. Next one up. Which one of your books do you wish people read more, and why? What's the underdog of their books?
What is the underdog? I got a royalty statement like 2 weeks ago, so I should actually have an answer to what the underdog is. What book should they read? I honestly don't know, because now it's like not only have I never read a book, I've also never written a book, you know. I think that like the Sedgwick series in general is, I think that like it's like such a tidy little series, and it's pretty low drama, and I like, sure, let's go with that one.
I feel like this is also going to be the one where you're just like, maybe I don't know anyone. What authors do you enjoy?
Okay. Like there was a time when I used to actually have a list, okay? Like, and I would update the list, and my brain was better when I did that. So we said Olivia Waite, Jackie Lau, Kara Jorgensen has a fantastic series that takes place in like a gaslight version of New York. And like there are were shifters and like magic hunters, and it is like the exact type of paranormal historical romance that I want when I'm in the mood for that. And the second one I think just came out. I actually really like Alexis Hall's books, like a lot. Like Boyfriend Material, like I did the thing where you finish it and then you go back and like you read the whole thing. Katie Casey's baseball romances are they're perfect. Okay, like I read Diamond Ring, which came out in April. I read it 4 times since then, which is not normal, okay? And I loved it. Like I cannot recommend it enough. Diamond Ring by Katie Casey, okay? It's so good. And Rachel Reed and Kate Nary's hockey romances are really, really good. They are just stellar. Rachel just put out Time to Shine, which is like the softest, sweetest hockey romance you could possibly want.
The only hockey romance I've ever interacted with was Check Please, and that was it.
Another like gold mine of fanfic.
Yes.
Yes.
Love it. Love Ngozi. That's a whole other thing. We could talk about that after this. Okay. So, next question up is, romance in particular tends to deal with more pleasant narratives, but history is complex and messy. Do you make an effort to balance / include some of the harder realities of the times?
So, as part of my research for this book, I was reading a memoir of a queer bar in Minneapolis, or maybe St. Paul, in the 40s and 50s. And it's called, like, Weeknights at Kermsers or something like that, okay? And in the introduction to this book, the author says something about how, like, when you're covering the history of like any marginalized group, what you want to do, like, there's this tension, right? You don't want to minimize like bad things, right? That's the last thing you want to do, but you want to recognize what the triumphs are, right? And like that really, like, I sat with that. I was like, that is exactly what my goal is, right? Is to sort of like shine a light on the triumphs and the hope and the fact that this did happen, that versions of this did happen, but not minimize exactly how hard it would be for that to happen, like exactly how much you would have to have every card would have to fall right for you, right, in order to have that kind of happy ending. But at the end of the day, like, I am writing for people who are reading today, right? I'm reading through a lot of people who are like going through it today, right? Like who are living in states that are not supportive of who they are, and want to read something that is hopeful and a little bit escapist, but that doesn't make them shut off the part of their brain that knows that history exists, okay? So that's where I fall on that. And it is a balancing act. Like, every now and then I'll look back and I'll be like, I don't know if I got that right, but that is my goal.
Okay. Next question up is there a genre that you haven't written but you would like to?
I do sometimes think about trying my hand with a contemporary, okay? And that's something like I go back and forth on. I'm currently on the fourth side. With the Page and Summer books, I have tried to write a mystery, and it has been an object lesson in how hard it is to make clues, okay? When what you really want to do is like have people eating pancakes or whatever, okay? And I think that as a writer, my strength does lie on the pancake side of things. and like throwing a murder in there is like the weirdest thing you can do when you're writing like a happy, but we have a whole genre of mystery that is exactly that, right? That is like pancakes and murder. And so my last attempt, and the reason why we don't have a third Page and Summers book this year is because I was like, it was like dark, you know, and that's not it. That's not it for me, right? Like writing something that is heavy is not what I'm great at, and it's not really what I want to do. It's going to make it really hard to sit down at the computer. And so I threw that out, and then when they finally do find a body and have to solve a crime, it'll be like at the beach with a puppy, you know?
Scooby-Doo.
Exactly, the Scooby-Doo energy, yes.
Yeah, where it's not just a murder, it's just a rogue real estate agent.
It's the worst person you've ever met. You know?
And the second part of this card was, do you have any fics you want to recommend, not your own, with 3 little hearts?
Oh, okay. I'm currently in a Star Trek frame of mind, and On Promenade by News by Postcard is such a perfect little gem of Kirk McCoy fanfic. And then there is I can't, off the top of my head, I don't know the title, but it's like there's a Kirk Spock that Waldorf wrote that it's like a royalty AU, but like space royalty. And it is a classic. It is literature, and I love it.
I'm going to have to rewatch this live stream afterwards and just be like, okay, because I can't take notes up here. Next question. Do you have a dream project you want to write? And/or do you have any time periods that you want to write in that you haven't written yet?
So, like, there was definitely a time when I wanted to write something medieval, okay? And I wanted to do this with the full understanding that I do not know anything about that period, okay? But I love it. And I'm so happy that they exist now, right? Because for a while it was like, there was a law that like if you were going to write a historical romance, it had to be set between 1800 and like 1825. And now there's Emma Denny, who's an English writer, has a book out called One Night in Heartswood, which is a medieval, and it is like super romantic, and it is like a sort of fairy tale-ish version of the Middle Ages, and it is lovely. And I'm so glad it exists because now I never have to think about writing a medieval romance again, right? Because I can be like, why would I need to? Like, this book is perfect and it exists, and I can, walk away from that. But like, I love that right now historical romance, probably because the pendulum with romance has swung and like contemporary is having such a moment, right? A lot of the historical romance that like is getting written right now is like much weirder. You know what I mean? And I love that. Like India Holton's books, which are like, there's like flying houses and like magic and like but like, is there magic? I have no idea. Like, and it's just, they're just so weird, and I just can't imagine them existing 5 years ago, and they're just a total delight. But yes.
Keep historical fiction weird.
Yes. Because for a while there was like, when something is super popular, there winds up being a samey quality to it. It happens with every genre. It happens all the time, okay? And like that happened with historical romance for a while. And it is just like, it's so nice to see this like diversity of settings, diversity of voices. Like this is like, it's great.
Now I'm thinking about how everything becomes samey again, and like just like once again another flashback to like 2013 dystopian novels all kind of being the same plot for a second. Terrible time. Dark time.
Unless you love dystopian fiction, right? Like imagine how like the people who like waited their whole life to read 27 different books about like girls being taken away into the fairy kingdom, like right now, like they are living their best lives right now.
I feel like every 5 years, like a book like changes the genre, and then like there's like a 5-year gap where everyone's just like, oh, I have to be this, and I'm just like, okay, so it was Hunger Games, and then it was like A Court of Thorn and Roses. I don't know who's gonna change it now, but I'm both excited and afraid. Okay. Next question up. What kind of input/involvement do you have in the production of your audiobooks?
Oh, so it depends. If it is one of my trad published books, like none. You know what I mean? It's technically none. Okay. Where they hire the narrator and all of that. But the man who's done most of my recent books is Joel Leslie, who also has done my self-published books. And so he and I are usually in communication about like, what is this character supposed to sound like? And like, yes, he sends me just like this is like the best idea. Okay, he sends me when he wants to know like what the characters are supposed to sound like. He'll ask for like what actor, right? And then like I have to expose the depth of my ignorance, and that I can only name like one actor, right? But that's fun to outsource, right? Like you can ask people on social media, like, what is a person with a voice, and they will answer you. But it'll also be like, what animal would they be if they were an animal? And like that actually really makes me think. And then I have to be like acknowledge that animals other than like dogs and cats exist. And which is like actually a very fun thing to think about, because this is all happening when that book is done and dusted. Like, it's out of my life. And so he's asking me those questions at the same exact moment that I'm having to think about promo, you know? So it works out really well.
Okay. Next up, in your latest book, We Could Be So Good, the characters are shown reading and reacting to fiction that features queer storylines. Can you talk about your research process to uncover 1950s pieces that dealt with queer stories? Was there anything that surprised you in your research?
So one of my favorite things is having characters talk about books, okay? Possibly this is because this is one of the ways that I relate to people, is by talking about books. And so in this book, they talked about, The Charioteer, okay, is a book that came out in like 1952 in England and was banned in America for 7 years because it was considered to be obscene. And copies of it managed to find their way to America, obviously, right? And so plenty of people had read it, but it was still banned. And it is a very, like, the book, it's called The Charioteer, but it actually takes place during the Blitz in England, and it's a soldier, an injured soldier and a sailor fall in love. Okay, it's more complicated than that, but that's it. And it has an optimistic ending. Like, it's not what we would really consider a happy ending by today's genre standards, but it is a happy ending, which is why it got banned. If everybody had died, it would have been a different story. But I tried to imagine, like, what it would be like if you are somebody who is used to a more tragic narrative and you read this book. Like, what would that do to you? Like, how would you feel about that? And also, I love the book, and I really wanted to work it into something I wrote, and I finally could, so I did. Yeah. But it's also like, when the closer you get to the present day, the more meticulously documented, like, everything is, obviously. And there are like contemporary reactions to, like, that book's publication, like, from people in the queer community. And it's like, I think that's just amazing. I love it.
Did anything surprise you in your research of the 1950s for the queer stories?
So, like, I think that going in, I wasn't exactly sure how much of an organized community there was, right? Like, it wasn't, like, I know that by the end of the 50s, you have the Mattachine Society, like, you do, like you have an infrastructure, right? At least in major cities. I think it surprised me, like, that even at the beginning of the 50s, like, you still have very, very underground, like, except in major cities, but like the Mattachine Society handed out pamphlets, like, for what to do if you get arrested, okay? Like, that's, like, really useful community organizing. You know what I mean? Like, that's the information that you would want to have. I love that.